This is Nathan Toronto, and you are watching the Break It Down Show with Pete
I
Ahern.
get to talk to, yeah, man, here I am. I get to talk to some amazing people. It's just what I get to do is just, it's mind blowing, because look, over 10 years that John and I have had this show, it's been Congress people, ambassadors, scholars, warriors, SEALs, spies, all kinds of people, and it just never ends where all the different people that I've got a chance to talk to and how we all work on various foreign policy, war, how do we war better, how do we educate before we war, and all these different just incredible minds, and we're all kind of pushing on this like nebulous blob of how do we, well, one, how do we avoid war in the first place? Let's just start right there, and we'll come right back to there when we start. But how do we avoid war better? How do we fight once we get there? How do we make it less lethal, or how do we just make it so nasty no one ever wants to fight again? And we're all just always working on these problems, sometimes to our detriment, sometimes to our success. And it's just like this never-ending puzzle that we're always trying to sort out. So I appreciate you joining us in this puzzling world. And
Sure.
thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, you're right. It is puzzling. War is one of the oldest human institutions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they talk about prostitution being like the oldest profession. It's like, well, somebody punched somebody in the mouth right about the same time.
Yeah.
And then some guy stood behind a rock, but I bet that guy's gonna punch someone in the mouth. Spying was born right around then, yeah.
Yeah.
But when we think about all these things, when we look at all these things right now, we have the entire Middle East is just like chomping at the bit. Like we have the subcontinent starting to fall apart. We have everything in the Persian Gulf area is getting crazy, and it's nuts. What are your general takes on where we're at right now?
It's a crazy world, and we need to do better.
Who's we?
Who's we? I think the world. I think policymakers need to figure out how to get people to talk, and we're so quick to go to the lethal solutions, right? And it's easy to see that as necessary, is the only option. But in a place is complicated and confusing and also really frustrating as the Middle East, it's so easy to press the easy button, right? But we've seen, if we haven't learned over the last 20 years, it's that pressing the easy button turns into the hard button. So careful what you wish for. So it's so easy to think of the short game, but really hard to think of the long game. And you see that in Yemen right now. It's like, okay, guys, it's going to be easy to get sucked in here. Let's go slow. Let's go slow.
Yemen's a great place to go to next. Before we get there, though,
Sure.
Before the Israeli-Hamas conflict started, one of the great wise people of our time was speaking in a news show, and they were asking this person. They said, "What are your thoughts on this Russian-Ukrainian conflict? What would you do about it?" And this person said, "I would work as hard as I could to get the conflict to stop." And it's so, instead of like what the news commentator wanted was the person to pick a side. And that person said, "No, people are dying. I want that to stop." And it was like, oh, we were all like, wow. That person was Donald Trump. But he's like, yeah, you know what, you're right. Like at all costs, how do we get back to talking? And I'm always saying, like, once you release the war dragon, you don't understand, it feasts on everything, and you can't stop it, you can't control it. It's going to destroy people, it's going to rape women, it's going to undermine everything, except for the folks who are far removed from it, who make a lot of money. It just destroys things, right? And so when we look at that, we want to mock Donald Trump, but the reality is people are dying, and we look at the macro so many times, but you don't realize, like, when there are not nearly enough men in Ukraine or Russia anymore, women are going to be exploited for a long, long time, and they're going to be these casualties that we never think about, and their hard lives and all of the things that happen with all of this, and over what, and so
Yeah.
we lose sight of this stuff, and it's a grim reality that it's going to be very hard for a lot of people, and we'll never actually be able to do a thing about it. We won't ever hear about it, but it will be happening.
Yeah, you talk about the dragon of war, right? It's sometimes war is justified. It's a strategic necessity, or it's to help a country that's been conquered, or whatever reason we start out war with a justifiable reason. But it is so difficult to see when the needs of the war change midstream, because we want to be committed to the outcome we started with, and we want to believe that that's achievable. But at some point, maybe there's a moment when we need to reevaluate our war aims. Or we always talk about, at SAMS, talk about the theory of victory, right? The reason we talk about the theory of victory is because we want to know when conditions don't match that potentiality. Right? That's and it's incredibly difficult once you release the dogs of war. But we have to be able to, and that's sort of the answer in the Middle East, right? One of the answers in the Middle East.
Yeah. 2 years ago, I was fond of saying, we have all these conflicts, even with Russia when it first started. Nobody cared about Yemen. Like, nobody even knew there was conflict in Yemen. It wasn't newsworthy. Like, this is another thing. It's like, you had this war going on. Like, who was even in this war? We don't know. We don't care. And I remember I asked Tim Kennedy, and he's like, it's not really important. And I'm kind of hard on Tim, because Tim, like, plays his character in the zeitgeist, right? And Tim's awesome. Like, if I saw Tim, I would shake his hand and be like, hey, man, I think you're awesome. I love what you do. And that's true. But also, like, he gets to play this, like, tough guy, galoot SF guy who, like, wrestles for a living professionally and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But nobody gave two fucks about Yemen 2 years ago. Couldn't care the least, until all of a sudden it's like everybody's like, I am now a Yemen expert, and this is what we need to do, and all of a sudden people know about merchant marines and all this other stuff.
Yeah, it's
They
amazing,
didn't care
isn't it?
2 years ago.
So I think that's the cost of shipping will do to you.
Yeah. And the reality is, if you scope back and you routes that have been transacted, primarily because the U.S. says so, is like 99.99%. It works because we and our partners in the world cooperates to allow it to work. Yes, there are the occasional kerfluffles and that kind of things, and right now is a big kerfluffle, but for the most part, we get to live in a very stable, luxurious state because we do have a successful military. We do have a track record of good foreign policy. So is this just a bump in the road that we get excited about, and things will calm back to our normal norm? Because we do move a lot of shit. We do have big ships. Or is this change?
I don't think it's changed necessarily. We haven't, I think, crossed a tipping point. But there's still the potential for these. It's not just one kerfuffle, right? It's a series of kerfuffles to merge into this larger regional conflict. That worries me a lot, right? And so I'm watching. I'm watching to see what happens in Yemen, to see if that expands. And the linchpin, I think, is Israel, and what does Israel do if Israel chooses to widen the conflict in a very deliberate and salient way? It has talked about 7 fronts, right? But only one or two of those are really salient. So as long as we can keep it that way, then I think there's a good chance of sort of confining the kerfuffles to little skirmishes and not having them agglomerating.
And when I'm saying kerfluffle, we are talking about people dying, so let's also understand that, right?
Yeah.
But we're scoped out when I say kerfluffle, right? When we scope back in, it's like, no, there's people dying. When people die, right. When people die, and the Palestinian news organization or the Palestinian government says, look at all these people that have died, that story gets blown out of proportion because, frankly, they're not honest. And Hamas has woven people into the combat front, and the Arab world has complied by not letting anybody leave. And so you get this, you get this predictable and projectable problem of saying, look at all these babies and women that have been killed, and we have this outsized information operation that it's like, well, how do you sort that out? Pause. Then you bring in the Netanyahu effect, where you can't sort out the politics from the policy because so many people hate Netanyahu because he doesn't play, he plays on one side of the political spectrum. And a lot of people who are in the media hate him simply because of politics. I am not putting Pete's opinion into any of this. These are just facts. So how do we sort this out when we try to consume this, when we try to make better decisions, when you're talking to colonels at SAMS and saying, how do you sort all this out when you're making your decision? Because as you know, like a lot of colonels, like, I don't vote, can't vote. I have to think clearly and not be partisan, right? Unless you're someone who chooses to do that, of course you can. But for the most part, most colonels choose to not do that. So how do you help them sort through a decision like this?
Yeah, that's a sticky wicket, right? That's the first thing I try to remember is that there are very well developed and sophisticated information operations going on both sides of this conflict, right? Actively, and so there's half of what we read we can't believe, but we don't know which half, and but there are some patterns and trends. I think that's the important thing. What are the patterns and trends we see over time? Did we trust the numbers that were coming from the occupied Palestinian territories, West Bank and Gaza, in terms of deaths and stuff during previous conflicts between Hamas and Israel? Well, yeah, they seem to be tracking with other demographic indicators. They're probably, they might not be completely accurate, but they're not off by an order of magnitude, right?
Right.
So even if there's a few numbers off, there's still thousands of people that are innocent civilians that are dying, right?
Yeah.
It's important to remember that. At the same time, what Hamas did was, this was medieval tribal warfare. We're going to let loose the dogs of war and make you feel what we feel each day, what the people that we are in our families feel each day. We're going to let that loose on you. And they use sexual violence on a rampant scale and systematic, right? To the extent that when they committed sexual violence, they invariably murdered the victim so they couldn't talk about their experience, right? It's like, and so that is appalling. And so it's important to remember that the capacity for brutality is something we should be very wary of, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've been to the Gaza Strip. I'm probably one of the few Westerners or Americans that has spent a night in a Gaza refugee camp, and back in the 90s, right? It's a long time ago, but I've been to all the places that I read about in the news that are rubble now. And I have a great deal of empathy for Palestinians, but, I've also been to Israel. I've spoken with Israelis, and I have some Israeli friends, and it's like, I can't imagine what they're going through.
Yeah.
It really breaks my heart. I don't think we should pick a side, but I do think that we can, perhaps we can do more to work with our Israeli friends to understand what's going on. Right? We have a tendency to just take the Israeli intelligence reports at face value, but not develop our own sources of intelligence there, because their intelligence network is so well developed. So there's an information dynamic that puts us behind the 8 ball in terms of deciding what are the trends we believe, what are the trends that we don't. So it's really hard to know who to believe and who not to. But
yeah,
man, I have empathy for both everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. It is very tough. And there's a lot of things that you could jump in and add contextual problems. Every
Yeah.
like rung of that ladder, like for one, again, going back to Hamas, they will kill their own people for their own means.
Yeah.
They have purposely woven their own people into their military operations, which, if they are a country, which from our point of view and the UN's, they are not.
There's definitely not.
They they've done things that you're not supposed to do and then picked a fight knowing that their own people would be blown up in these things. And Israel can say, we have done our best to be very specific, and as specific as we would be in our retribution in something like this. We certainly have not got our hands clean. We went to Iraq and we fucked up a lot of people. We exacted vendetti, not vendetta, but we have plural vendettas on people that we didn't even know about. I mean, I'm guilty of that for sure in my game. And so, we're talking about thousands of people. Oh, come on, 100,000 people. I mean, we killed a lot of Iraqis, and nobody put charges on us, and we started a war that a lot of people think was illegal. Where are the charges? So I don't, before we get too high and mighty and everything else, we have to remember that, we all, as again, this is the war dragon, right? It just chews, it chomps and it destroys things. So there is that. The if tomorrow,
I think it's important to remember that there's, I see the analogy you're making between Iraq and the Gaza Strip, right? But the scale of destruction by square mileage of territory is much, much more profound in the Gaza Strip than it was in Iraq. Much more profound.
If we had to fight the Gaza Strip, it would be worse.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we used the Moab because we could, I mean, we would, anyhow, I don't want to get too wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
Because there is the other side of that very argument. And it's like, but we try to be careful. The Israelis try to be careful. Hamas purposely uses our deliberate nature to not hurt people, to confound that by making us hurt people that we don't want to hurt, so.
Yeah. Or sometimes deliberately directly hurting them, right?
Yeah. And then if right now there was an Israeli sortie flying into Iran to attack part of their nuclear capability to deny them a weapon, and if you believe some of the intel reports there, it's imminent, maybe even happened already, that would be an expansion of the war, maybe not, but further escalating tensions, from a country that on the second those people flew into Israel to attack people were tweeting excitedly, go Hamas, wipe Israel off the earth. And they've already said openly, if we had a nuclear weapon, we would eliminate Israel, right? Like at some point, Israel gets to believe all of that stuff when their neighbors and their proxies are all saying, we would love to see every Jew die, and they put openly, it's like, what are we supposed to do? It's crazy.
Yeah. I'll just say there's two sides of that, right?
Yeah.
I don't agree at all. I think the Jewish state is here to stay.
Right.
Those people, the people that are living in Israel today, they don't. Nobody deserves to die or have their society wiped out because of their religion or their background. They weren't there in 48 or 37 or 17 or whatever it was, right? They're just trying to live their lives. But what we do see is coming into the mainstream of the Israeli discourse is this idea that why don't we just displace the Palestinians? Why don't they just leave Gaza? Right. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier the Arab states won't let them leave. I suspect, I don't know for certain, but I suspect that the Palestinians themselves don't want to leave the Gaza Strip for as hellish as a landscape as it is, because it resonates with 1948, right? They fled their homes in 48 to escape violence and destruction, and expecting to be able to go back, and now they can't go back, and now they're in Gaza, and so they want the same thing to happen. So Jordan, Egypt, they want the problem to be Israel's problem. They don't want it to be their problem. And so the losers are the Palestinians.
It is all so hard. And by the way, let's I know I've kind of been beating on the Palestinian side a little bit, but let's not forgive Israeli bad behavior when they've gone crawfish on deals and everything else. And I'm talking to you about these impossible problems because these are impossible problems. We could switch over to the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and how do you sort that out right now? Like it appears today that it's going to be a tie, and here we are trying to sort out how do we sort our role in this. And so I'm just going to bring it back to us when we look at our role in foreign policy. And I'm just going to speak from Pete's point of view. I expected this administration to continue with its history of failure because it has one, and when I see the amount of unrest that's going on, and even if this is just kerfluffles and these things will calm down and we'll get back to the status quo at some point, that's not their benefit. That's just the norm that's kind of been built into the system. And it takes a lot of energy to make things not work normally, right? But I expected the foreign policy problems because the people that have worked the last 20 years and graduated up, and this is not political, this is just systematic in foreign policy. As they've graduated up, these people have struggled to get good results.
Are you waiting for me to say something? That's your turn to talk, Nathan.
No, but I mean that's
it's a thought experiment, right? Let's pretend for the sake of your argument that it was a different set of people that was sitting in the administration making decisions. Would we have the same or different outcome? Right? There's lots of tendencies in the system. We often ascribe a great deal of agency to ourselves and to our policymaking, right? But there's so much latency in the system and in geopolitical latency, right? That would anybody have really changed things? Would one set of decisions one way or the other would that have changed things? I mean, look at the JCPOA. Right, that was probably the best deal of a bad situation. And one administration implemented it, another administration de-implemented it, and then the other administration tried to re-implement it, but it's sort of like halfway. But like, did that really change anything? If that had stayed in place, would that have calmed Iranian ambitions in terms of irregular warfare in the whole region? I don't think so. Right? And that's just one example. Right? And there's a central tendency in American politics that a lot of policies don't really change that much from administration to administration. Right? Because of the nature of our political system. It's first past the post, it's single by district plurality, and it's there's winner take all sort of system. So I tend not to believe that one set of policy decisions will make a fundamental difference in change in the world, like the economy, right? The president says, pick your party. President says, hey, look, I did X, Y, Z. I got to create a job. I did stimulus. I did, blah, 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 and see how the effect it had. But you talk to economists, and they're like, really, dude? That was going to mostly happen anyway, right? I mean, the discussion over the interest rate of the Fed. What's the Fed going to do? Oh, hike it, lower it, and you see party positions on where the interest rate should be change based on whether they're in office or not. It's like, okay,
I will say this, though, when you go back 16, 20 years, though, and the same people have graduated from college, got the master's degree and that kind of thing, and they have worked in that system, and they fall into a belief set, and they haven't achieved the goals that they set out to achieve. Matter of fact, they've had a lot of negative values, but they bring back this perception that they've done things. And so the money they've spent on these things and the failures that they've invested in, that does accumulate over time. It does create that latency that you're talking about. And so you do have discontent. Iraq does tend towards Iranian control, and these things do happen. Syria does destabilize. Libya does destabilize. And these things do create things that weren't there before we started sticking our dick fingers in things and fucking up stuff. So there is some accumulation of instability, because when we show up someplace, we do create instability because we bring money, we bring power, we bring people with bad ideas that think are good intentions, but we tend to export problems. That is one of our exports.
Maybe I think there's a lot of good that we don't hear about. We hear about the colossal failures more often, right? Because they're so colossal. I mean, Iraq was a colossal failure. The decision to do nation building in Afghanistan, another colossal strategic failure, right? That with a bit of self-reflection, we might have been able to avoid with a little bit of restraint, right? And my worry is that we're not learning those lessons. And I'm talking independent of party, independent of who's in power, who's making policy decisions. We have a tendency to press the easy button. Right. And not it's like Neustadt and May, thinking in time, right? And this is like old school, right? This is the policymakers tend to jump to what are our options. Instead of thinking to, okay, what is the problem? And it's the tendency not to think about what the problem is, and think instead of, okay, we're confronted with this problem, however we define it, we're going to sort of leave it undefined, but we're going to say, okay, what are our options? Because it's the bias towards action. We need to be seen as doing something in order to appear accountable to whomever your constituency is.
Right.
And so we're just going to do that. And without thinking, okay, what actually is the problem? I mean, if we had stopped and thought about what the problem was in Iraq or Afghanistan, we would have realized, no, we can't solve that problem. We're gonna start the exit strategy now. And instead of frittering away in blood and treasure, is just sad.
It's I mean, there's a lot of things to say. By the way, I put a link for Neustadt and May's thinking of time.
Oh, it's a great read.
Because when you said that, I'm like, well, there you go.
It's like 70 years old or something, right?
But here's the thing, though, is if you're me and you attach yourself to units and you work advising commanders, you read the SAM's catalog. You read the books that Georgetown is teaching people, so that when they talk, you can speak their language, right? And so when you say Neustadt and May, I'm like, all right. Because these books are out there and they do inform how we make decisions, and you're like, okay, I mean, we want to learn these things, because hopefully when we learn these lessons, we're adding to our pile of books, we're adding to our experiences, and we're hopefully getting better at slowing down and improving our accuracy. We are always in this big rush. Like in my year here, my command, this is how I'm going to make my career. We're going to get these things done. And the thing I was always trying to tell commanders, like, hey, just do less things, get them right more often, and then don't worry about legacy, because that's all going to be bullshit when you leave. Like, when you come back in 5 years, what you're not going to do, you're not going to recognize any of your successes. So just fuck up less. Fuck up less, man. Just fuck up less. That's really what I wanted to say, all of these guys. And they're all wonderful, but that's really the answer. It's just fuck up less. Just don't come in like you know everything. Be the least important guy here and just fuck up less. And that was the lesson I wanted to teach everybody.
But it's hard. What did that old Prussian say? Be more than you seem.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I also wanted them to talk about Prussians less because Not that Prussians are bad, but we all took our battle lessons, and I'm like Sun Tzu, and I'm like, read the parts of Sun Tzu where he's not fighting, because a lot,
Yeah.
I focus on the ground truth. And so when we talk about all these things, we're talking about like imposing our will. I'm like, this, and my peers who study this stuff will get mad when I say it, but the center of gravity is the general population in these modern fights from that I was part of, Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, like, you're not using that term right. And I'm like, well, guess what? That's why you're losing,
That's why we're losing.
Yeah, you can't get these people to believe in their government. You can't get them to believe in the rule of law that you're selling. You can't get these people to go this way. And so that's why you're losing. And they're like, you're not using it right. And I'm like, well, you're not winning. So and my job as a spy here is to go, you need to do this to win more and remove that to lose less, and they're doing it to you. They're moving the population in their direction, so they're winning more, and you're not even paying attention, so you're losing even more. And so I can't change that if you won't change your behavior. Yeah,
welcome to warfare in the information age, right? This is it's the center of gravity. We think of let me rephrase. The target of so many of our operations are capabilities, right? And we think of that as the center of gravity.
Right.
If we just erode enemy capabilities X, Y, Z amount, then they won't be able to harm us anymore. But, there's nothing we can do about them hating us. So we're just going to punt on that, wash our hands, and keep hitting their capabilities. Okay. Do you realize where that goes? And we're seeing it. We want to erode Russian capabilities in Ukraine, right? We want to erode Hamas capabilities in the Gaza Strip. We want to erode Houthi capabilities in Yemen. I mean, pick your bad guy nowadays, and it's about eroding capabilities.
Right.
But what is the pathway to sustainable peace? I think we should have a strong military. Right. We should be the most capable military in the world. We should have a qualitative edge over everyone. We should maintain that. Absolutely, without question. Right. We need to invest in that. We need to continue investing. I know defense spending is high, but that hurts a little bit because other things we can spend on. But we need to maintain those capabilities. We need a qualitative edge. But we can't approach everything with a mailed fist.
Boy.
Right? We can't.
Yeah.
We have to put forward an ungloved hand, and we have to make compromises, sometimes hard compromises. And that's and seeing problems for what they are, like Neustadt and May counsel us, is I think the start of
that. Yeah, one of the things that and I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. One of the things that I'm trying to deal with my Ground Truth Center that I'm trying to get off the ground is. We ask a lot of our lieutenants, our O1s through O3s, our young officers. We're like, here are the 15 tasks you need to master to do your job.
Yeah.
And here are the 27 jobs you're going to do and not even worry about your actual job, And so you're going to be an electioneer, and you're going to work on governance, and you're going to, and I'm like, I think we aren't professionals in any of these things. This is an infantryman who wants to move his unit into formation and, close with and destroy the enemy. Yeah. And you're never going to do that, right? And I'm like, well, by the way, economy of force. So don't stick your neck out.
Right.
By the way, for the audience, economy of force is like, you don't have any help. So don't go too far away, because if you do, you're fucked. And by the time
no help is coming.
And by the time your QRF comes, they're going to be fucked. And all of you is going to get whacked because we can't help you, right? Because you're too far away. Yeah. So they're like, don't go too far away from home. And it's terrifying to think that we send these people out to do things like engage with females or establish rule of law or establish government in a place that there's parts on the Afghan map, man, like whole districts, counties for the audience, where we're just like, wipe it off the map. We're never going there again. And like, just not part of the government. We can't do it. There's no roads. There's no nothing there, whatever. And so it's like, we're not even going to go there, and not part of the country as far as we're concerned. You think about that. And we're trying to stabilize this place. And we can't even, the U.S. government can't even go there.
Okay, well, the problem in Afghanistan wasn't that there were no-go districts in Afghanistan. Okay, the problem in Afghanistan is that we didn't think about what the problem was,
Yeah.
and can we solve it with the resources we're willing to devote to the problem.
Yeah.
If we had paused in 2003, 2004, 2005, and said, you know what, either that's not going to work or this isn't working, we would have gotten the same outcome if we pulled out then as we got if we, that we got when we pulled out and when we did.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
we need to be less. We need to put guys like that you're talking about in situations to succeed.
Yeah.
These are upstream problems of not just policy making, but also operational planning.
Sure.
Let's put our trigger pullers in a position to succeed. Give them the guidance and the resources they need. What did Powell say? Don't go to a fight unless you can win it.
Yeah.
We need to sort of think about that a little more.
Yeah.
Right, and then that would make us a little more exercise a little more restraint.
We don't necessarily need as much maneuver capability. Oh boy, am I going to say this? We don't need as much maneuver capability then, right? We don't want to put boots on the ground. What politician's like, I want to put boots on the ground? Like, no one's running on that right now. We don't want to have a draft. So I know we need to have a certain amount of maneuver capability, but maybe we need to have more soldierly diplomatic capability, where we do focus on a different skill, where these guys can sit and negotiate or whatever it is, governate and work on those things. Because again, like we have these guys who are like, I'm there to partner. Like, well, you don't even know how to work an interpreter professionally, Colonel, right? Like all of them. Like you don't know, you do not have a TRADOC. TRADOC is the Training and Doctrine Command of everybody. You don't have a TRADOC certified advanced professional level course in how to work an interpreter, yet you're going to work with one your entire career. How the hell does that work? And you're going to go.
Yeah, but maybe the answer isn't that, hey, we're going to send the military in because they're the most available.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're the most easily deployable. They have there are things around the military to keep them safe in danger zones.
Right.
Maybe the answer is to let's set political conditions so that we don't have to send the military in. Or if we send the military in, we send them in with people who can do that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I think the PRTs, the preferential reconstruction teams, were a good idea that in execution sort of fell apart, right? Because we didn't understand the problems we were facing.
Do you want to say the words abysmal failure? Is that what you want to say? That's what I'm going to say. I can say that if you don't want to say it. I'll say it. It's abject failure, completely ill thought out, horribly assessed. I mean, yeah.
But it briefed so well, Pete.
Oh, no, listen, everything briefs well. That briefed well. Yeah, we're going to send Air Force majors who have no fucking business being in there. And a doctor. That'll be good. Send a doctor. Yeah. Look, everybody had good intentions. Everybody tried hard. Everybody was well educated, but they just weren't prepared for the job at hand. They weren't trained there, and the people who had done it thought they all did great. And then if you took them back, they'd be like, what the fuck happened? And I thought we did a great job, but you didn't. I didn't. We didn't. And it's hard to hear that news. We weren't honest with ourselves.
I love McDougall's book, A Promised Land Crusader State. Mm-hmm. It helped me look at myself and my views as an American with some clear-eyed analysis. That what are the reasons we go out and do? We're this meliorist, right? We're this meliorist country. We want to go out and make the world a better place. The sort of sense of American messianism, that everybody should not be just like us, but should be sort of like us.
Yeah.
Right. They adopt the principles of liberal democracy. And I actually do believe that in my heart of hearts. I think the world would be a better place if people adopted the ideals of liberal democracy. But they're not going to look exactly like they look at home.
Yeah.
They're just not.
Yeah. The liberal part
just like,
is going to be up to them.
Yeah,
You know?
just like Europe looks fundamentally different from America in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though they have liberal democracy for the most part.
Just like Alabama looks totally different than Washington.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we need to get some allowance for local conditions and local agents.
Have you ever read Power, Faith, and Fantasy by Michael Oren?
Oh, no, I haven't. No.
It's super great. He's been an ambassador either from us to Israel or Israel to us. Either way, scholar, deep Israeli ties, deep American ties. He's like, this is what we've done in the Middle East since we went there. And it's like the same stuff over and over and over again. You know, like, we're here to teach you about Jesus. We're here to teach you about farming, you know, and it's like keep reinventing the same plan, you know, like, have you guys heard of cabbage? Let me show you how to farm, you know. Like 10 years later, like, have you heard of Jesus? Have you heard of cabbage? And we just keep going back and back and back. And it's like, can we get an original idea? You know, it's so crazy. But, you know, and when you see that in black and white, you realize, man, what it taught me is there are no new ideas. It all briefs well. I know what to do. You're like, no, you don't. And what that taught me to do was to go into the SharePoint server with the unit that either I gained or they gained me. And I'd be like, we can do whatever you want to do. You guys are the boss. However, here are the last 5 units slide deck on that same original idea.
Yeah.
And I would have to give it to him. That's what I learned. You had to give it to a major or higher. Otherwise, the captain's listen, Turner, and spit in his cup, and he'd get mad at me. So I'm like, I got to give it to a major. Otherwise, they're too thick-headed to get it. And these are smart dudes. They're just like haven't evolved to the point where they can go like, wait a second, wait, what? We've done this before? And I'm like, yeah, your peer has briefed this to another you who's, you know, and it's like, oh, man.
Well, there are institutional patterns in the U.S. military that prevent captains from making the kind of difference that you want majors to make. Right? So.
Yeah. There's the link for Promised Land Crusader State, by the way, for everybody who wants it.
Yeah, it's a great little book. I gifted it to my daughter for Christmas. Oh, the look on her face was precious.
Yeah.
Really?
Are we getting better at all this stuff? I mean, look, you see some of the brightest minds like working through SAMs and all that, and all the other things you do. Are we getting better at this stuff?
I think we are. Right, okay. And let me tell you why I say that.
Okay.
Look at the past 500 years of history. Right, there's a pattern of institutions only change in the most dire and absolute crisis, where the state is collapsing, society is falling apart, and it's forced to change. But in fits and starts, sometimes very messy fits and starts, in the United States and also in the international order that we sometimes lead, sometimes don't. We have a system where things can lurch toward betterness, even though there's some stumbling towards entropy at the same time, right? So we don't have the sorts of cataclysmic events or conflicts that we did earlier. I think about the Spanish flu, which was about 100 years ago, right? That was a pretty cataclysmic event. But the global response to the COVID-19 pandemic, whatever the political views on that response, demonstrated that there's a great deal more resilience in the world today than there was 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we didn't experience the sorts of knock-on effects in 2020 and beyond as we did in 1920, 21, 22. I think that's progress, right? There are lots of well-intentioned people in the U.S. government that see the problems we have, that are self-reflective, that see, we have challenges that we need to do better. It's not just other people need to. We need to do better. We need to figure ourselves out. We need to organize ourselves. And the sort of the policy rancor happens at this level, but at the action level, at the people that are implementing. I think there's lots of well-intentioned people that recognize we need to get better, and I think we can tap that. That's an untapped resource that if people at the policy level wanted to access, they could. So I'm hopeful. I'm
Are
not
we getting worse?
Uh, um, I,
Because these things can
think,
both be true at the same time.
yeah, I think we go back to all these conflicts that are destroying people's lives.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not getting better for them. So it's like we haven't maybe done enough to put the world in a position to raise all boats.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There are some people that are stuck in the shoals.
Okay.
And their boats getting swamped.
Mm-hmm.
But most people, most of the time, are doing a little better than they were. We clearly need to do better.
Mm.
We absolutely, and I think the United States has a responsibility to do more in the world to make it a better place for everybody, right? And that involves us paying the cost of that at times. And I think that's what the cost of peace. If we want to be able to set the conditions where we don't have to go in and slap somebody down and get into another quagmire, well, then that involves some left the boom costs, right?
Yeah.
So I think we should be clear-eyed about that.
So then there's the in-between question: is what we're doing, does it matter, right? Like if we're going to use entropy and really look at thermodynamics, is this system just going to continue to equalize regardless of how much waving our arms that we do? Like if capitalism really is the best answer until we come up with something else. And, if there are less poor people, are less sick people, are less hungry people than there were 50 years ago, do we need to be as involved if we do tend to destabilize things, at least in the micro and in the short term? If you look at 100-year block of time, do we need to be as involved?
I don't think we always destabilize when we get involved. The United States does do a lot of good in the world that goes unheralded, especially in collaboration with Western-leaning allies, right? The thought experiment that you want, I guess, is a future thought experiment, is in 50 years and 100 years, will China have collapsed? Do we think it's going in that direction? Are the demographics against China? Do we think, because that's the alternative model, right? We have sort of the British American model that's been prevailing for the last, let's call it a couple hundred years, right? Ever since the peace again. And that's sort of been the dominant model. The people that's the model that the system has stumbled and lurched towards in fits and starts over the decades. I don't believe in the Chinese model.
Yeah.
I've seen the Chinese model in action in countries not named China, and I think it's pretty exploitative. I think the latent tendency there is to brittleness and weakness. I don't think it's sustainable, right? I think the only sustainable model is one where you can convince people that people who are making decisions actually do have your interests at heart.
Yeah.
But we're at a critical moment. We're at a very critical moment in the United States, especially because we need to demonstrate that our institutions work. Because there's masses of people in this country that believe that the institutions aren't working for me. Democracy is not working for me. What I'm giving up in order to believe in this American dream, this American ideal, isn't working for me. So, regardless of what side of the spectrum politically you're on, there are people that need to know that there's something at stake for them.
Yeah.
They can have a better life. I mean, I think of all the people that graduate college and like, yo, I can't afford to buy a house. I can't live the American dream.
Yeah.
Right. That's like,
Yeah. The one thing about the American dream is, I think uh, we've built a lot more dreams, though. Like you're not stuck with a white picket fence house and two kids and a station wagon. Like you can go live in Portugal. Like, wow, like and work in America and be independent of a house and uh, invest money and become a multimillionaire by just simply living wherever the heck you want to live and not being, I mean, being tied to a house is a way to live a dream, but you also can travel abroad and work. And that's, boy, that is a dream for some people. Like
Yeah.
we have actually opened up in a lot of ways, a lot more freedom. Like in so many ways, what we do does work. Europe has opened up and in some ways, Central and South America have opened up opportunities where
Yeah.
they've stabilized in a lot of ways. There's still a lot of areas where it hasn't happened, but the world is becoming more tied together and stable. It's hard to see sometimes, but like you said, if you look at it in the positive way, where there is investment and there are I mean, look how many partners America does have. Like, sure, we have the Five Eyes, but we have so many more partners than that. Like the Straits of Malacca are going to stay open. All these different areas that could be
Right.
choke points, right? They're open and they're not going to close. And we are going to be able to provision each other and get better and better and better at that. It is
Yeah, I mean,
remarkable.
that's absolutely true, Pete. And it's we have a wealth of friends, and the NDS is right. That's the key resource for us. But my worry is if you drive through rural West Virginia,
Yeah.
drive through in inner city Chicago, right, and you see the dream that you talked about
Yeah.
of going abroad and
Yeah.
being digital warriors. That's not open to everybody, right? That mobility is not open to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I used to have the American dream of owning a home, and that's literally foreclosed. My dream looks a lot more like what you described.
Yeah.
But I know that not everybody has those opportunities, and I think I feel an obligation personally to do what I can to make those opportunities available to others.
Yeah. I mean,
That
that
they
is
don't feel
part of
like they
that
have.
access to that opportunity. I don't want to say like everybody's got a bootstrap because I know like that's a
Yeah,
little bit corny, but those opportunities are there. And then there are people saying, I'm looking for someone in the inner city of Chicago who's willing to bootstrap, and then I'm going to give them more leather. I'm going to give them a shoehorn. I'm going to, America does have these opportunities, but they are looking for people who then go, you're working hard. I want to reward that hard work and I want to get you to where you're going. Like we are full of these things. They are
yeah,
full of, we are a charitable nation. So I don't want to say there are people that we don't internally, person to person, we don't enfeeble people. Our government sometimes enfeebles people, but personally, I don't think we do that. And we do look for people that want to be believed in and that need a hand up to get to that next level,
yeah,
So I think we do have that. But West Virginia is a hard place to get out of, for sure.
yeah. So a little perspective. My wife and I like to travel, and we went to Peru last week. Is absolutely magical. Machu Picchu is amazing, by the way. If
Yeah.
you ever have a
Wow.
chance to go, do go.
Yeah.
But it just hits you in the face how anybody who was born in America, they already hit the geographical lottery,
Totally. Yeah.
right? You hit the geography lottery if you're born in the United States, because you see what people are going through every day just to get by
Yeah.
in a country like Peru, and you're like, yeah, okay, that's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
That's humbling. It's really humbling, and it makes me appreciate all the prosperity that I have.
Yeah.
Right. I'm very, very grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to say you can make waste in your house, wherever you live, wherever you dwell, into potable water, push a button, never think about it again.
Yeah.
That is like around the world. It's like, oh my God, what are you, a god?
Yeah.
Like, it's like crazy.
Yeah.
It's that is so we are so marvelously successful. And then if you simply apply yourself, the vast majority of the time, if you just apply yourself, you will be able to create a pretty comfortable life. It is hard. Like I live in Orange County. It is very hard to buy a house here. But if you said, you know what, I'm going to buy a house no matter what, even if it's not in Orange County, you went to somewhere else, you can do it. You could say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to establish make money. And that's my goal. And most everybody here could do that. If they said, I'll be damned if I'm going to be damned by that. And they did it.
Yeah.
Most everybody could accomplish that. You could drive Uber and say, I'm going to drive Uber every day in addition to my job. Every day, no days off, I'm going to work, and I'm going to work 16 hours a day, regardless, within a very short amount of time. You could have $100,000 of extra money and say, I am now going to invest and buy a franchise, a significant franchise with your 100. And it wouldn't take you 10 years to do this. It would take you less than 5. If you really said, I insist, I'm going to do this. Nothing else gets between me and my goal. And in America, you can do that. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's fun, but that is absolutely possible. And you might have less time to take because someone's like, what in the hell are you doing? Oh, I'm going to make $100,000 show up in my account by outworking everybody else and outworking every problem. You can do that here.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities here. A lot of opportunities.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. What else do you want to talk about here? We are down for like almost an hour, but what do you want to get into? I definitely want to promote. So look, everybody go to Nathan Toronto. That link is right there. You guys can see that. I've been putting links to everything else. Here's his book. You can get that at that link there. It's in the remarks. You can just click on that. What else do you want to get into, man?
So it's been, 50 and a half years since we ended the draft in America?
Yeah. You ready for it to come back?
No.
Oh.
I think maybe a national service type thing might be useful, but there's got to be a lot more consensus on that front. I'm sort of withholding judgment. But what I do want to point out is that there's lots of Americans that are losing touch with the military experience, right? And I think that's important to recognize. So I started my blog on Bullet Points. It's a science fiction magazine. I'm a science fiction author as well, and I love veteran authors. I love them to death because I have friends who served in the conscript army, and they're the pillars of military science fiction, and they're dying. David Drake died in December last month, right? And so we need the military experience of those professional military members to be expressed in military science fiction, so we don't lose touch with what warfare is like nowadays, with what the military experience is nowadays. There's so much, fascist gun porn in military science fiction that doesn't serve us well. And so, yeah, I love reading military science fiction by my veterans, and I love for them to appear in my magazine.
Yeah.
I think Americans, civilians, need to recognize what war is like nowadays. I think fiction is one way to doing that.
Yeah, there's that right there below is the link. Go check that out, everybody. bulletpoints.nathantoronto.com. Go check that out. If Pete was president, we'd have a national service. Doesn't have to be military, but every young person is going to satisfy some kind of short-term service. And if you want to stay longer, maybe we'll even buy you some college. How about that? Go work in forestry for 6 years, walk out with a degree. That'd be
How
awesome.
long? How many months, Pete Turner?
18 months minimum.
18 months minimum, huh?
Yeah, and if you stay a little longer, you get a little more. You get a little something. You pick up a little pay or whatever it is, and maybe you find some people who are naturally gifted for whatever federal service they apply for. Hey, we'll take you in over here at NOAA, and get some entry level. It's almost like an internship, right? You get a chance to serve and see your country and meet fellow Americans in a different setting. That's one of the best things about the military is like, you're from where? Mississippi. I never met anybody from Mississippi.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get to meet fellow people. You get led by, one of these, like the military is like full of smart people, educated people mentoring each other. It's a marvelous thing,
Yeah, it is.
And, so
my buddy Tom Persino, he's at the Army War College. He wrote a book called The Nation Forged in War. I'm not sure if you know Tom, but that's one of the point he makes, that the conscript army in World War II actually put a bunch of people together from a lot of different places that weren't used to being together. And they fought for a common cause, and that really unified a nation in a lot of ways. Now, was that segmented? Yeah, I mean, African Americans
but it
didn't
wouldn't
have
be
the same
today.
experience, but like Jews, Italians, Greeks, all these people that were sort of disparate prior to World War II, those communities tended to come together. I think that's
Yeah.
so I think what you're saying is right. I think that logic would obtain if we were to do national service again, if it's well constructed and it's not purely a military option.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to force people. There's every cabinet seat, has multiple departments underneath it, and you're just like, there you go. Here, we need people. All right, come on in, and then got to be military, and just get started. And feel free to transfer. Do 3 months. You know what? This isn't for you. We'll shove you over to the left, shove you over to the right, whatever. Try it out.
Yeah.
I can solve all the problems. I just need another hour and a half, and then we'll get them all. We'll get them all figured out. Super easy. This is Pete's World's easy. All right. Yeah. Anything? I don't want to keep you longer. I know it's fun talking, but anything else you want to cover or get into? We got time, but I also don't want to waste yours.
No, this has been lovely. I mean, this is a lot of fun, Pete.
Yeah.
I think I just want people to know that I'm an optimist.
Yes.
Right? The world is a crazy, crazy messed up place, but we have the opportunity to make it a better place. And we shouldn't be captured by our pessimism and be dragged down by our abysmal periodic failures. And even though entropy is a fact of life, and even though there's latent tendencies in the geopolitics of the world, we can still make the world a better place. Right.
Have you any idea if I love thermodynamics, I love thinking about them and how it matters to things, right? Energy and all that kind of thing. Because every time we see entropy, I just think about it and it always triggers all these thoughts. And one of my thoughts is, and I haven't found the answer for this, and maybe there isn't one, but if we find a even earlier in the ordinate rules of thermodynamics, if we find something more prime than the zeroth law of thermodynamics, what is before zeroth? Is there like a word? Like, has someone invented that word? Is there like an ordinate rank for that? Would there be something that's...
Yeah, I have no idea, but there's a science fiction story in there somewhere.
Yeah.
Hey, Pete, I have open submissions on my blog. You can submit something.
There you go. Yeah. We'll find. Yeah, I'll write something. I have no time to write anything like that right now, but I love a conversation. It's like when I found out, like, I know there's something after tertiary, and then one day I found the list, and I'm like, oh yeah, someone has spent their life naming everything after tertiary, and I'm like, oh my God, there's everything has names, right? Like someone has already done all this work. Like Euler did all of the math work back in the 1700s and named and did and figured out everything, and we're all like, oh my God, this guy's been everywhere, So, all right, I'm gonna run the credits here. So stay by. I'll be right back to you. Thank you, everybody else. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you.